The time for silence is over. There was once an unprecedented time in American history when common citizens of their day began to define the rights of man and documented how those rights were being violated by their current government. They wrote to each other. They debated with each other. Ultimately, it was these common citizens who recorded these rights for all eternity, and furthermore created a new and free nation founded on these rights with liberty and justice for all of its citizens. Times have changed, but these rights remain.
I don't take responsibility.
That all citizens have the right to life. That all citizens have the right to pursue happiness. That all citizens are created equal. That all citizens have the right to a public trial. That all citizens have the right to peacefully assemble. That all citizens have the right to petition their government. What happens when you try to exercise these rights today? Is this government honoring your rights? Or are they violating them? Is this the government that those citizens aspired to? There is a solution.
I don't take responsibility. I don't take responsibility. I don't take responsibility.
Join me every Sunday afternoon for a new show where common citizens, you and I together, discuss with each other issues of today, where we demand proof and evidence is required, where we seek the truth and will not be silent. Join me this coming Sunday afternoon and take part in America's oldest and most honored tradition. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Left Speaks. My name is Chris. As always, I will be your host. Today is May the 9th. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. And unfortunately, we are still 4 months, 3 days removed from the insurrection attempt on January the 6th, incited by former President Donald Trump, for which there have still been no real consequences. In fact, as we are going to establish throughout today's show, the Republican Party is headed in the opposite direction. Their version of distancing themselves from the insurrection attempt on the Capitol is not to try and hold those who encouraged, incited, and set the date accountable for their actions, but rather to pretend that it was no big deal and that we don't need to talk about that anymore. Specifically, I'm referring to the situation centered around the third ranking member of House Republicans, Representative Liz Cheney, daughter of former Vice President Dick Cheney. Now, I have a ton of disagreements with the Cheneys. That much should be obvious from the name of the show. I am not Liz Cheney's biggest fan. That much should be obvious from the name of the show. I don't support her stance, for instance, on being against gay marriage. But at least she can acknowledge the reality that the former president spread this big lie about election fraud leading up to and on January the 6th that directly resulted in the insurrection attempt on the Capitol building. It's sad how low the bar has sunk for the Republican Party. As we're going to go through, there really isn't a logical reason besides loyalty to former President Trump that House Republicans are trying to remove her from her leadership role. And it is extremely depressing and frustrating that we have reached the point where speaking truth bars you from being a leader in the Republican Party. Now, I've said countless times on this show before, we can disagree all day long. I basically have two rules. Be civil. Don't come on the air and show your ass. Let's have a realistic, real conversation. And let's try to base our opinions and our political stances in reality, not in fantasy. The massive multi-statewide election fraud conspiracy theory that President Trump was pushing would have required the input, cooperation, and coordination of a half a dozen states at minimum, hundreds of counties, hundreds to thousands of polling locations in those counties, and hundreds to thousands of poll workers and watchers in those counties. Spoiler, not all of them were Democrats. Sidney Powell, who was a member of Trump's legal team and touted by Trump until she went and had her crazy interview, and then all of a sudden he supported what she was doing, but she wasn't a member of his legal team, has said now that she's being sued that no reasonable person would believe her claims about Venezuela controlling Dominion voting systems. These claims about massive voter fraud on a scale to influence the presidential election have been tossed out of 60 plus courts. Courts with judges that were Democrats, courts with judges that were Republicans, and courts with judges who were appointed by President Trump himself. President Trump, former President Trump, continues to spout the big lie about there being massive multi-statewide election fraud that influenced the presidential election and caused him to lose. And Representative Cheney, to her credit, has pointed out that there's no evidence of this, that it's bullshit, that it led directly to January the 6th and the assault on the Capitol building. And every time President Trump spouts out a new one of these things, which you basically have to go to his website blog to find now, because social media outlets such as Facebook and Twitter basically said this is irresponsible and we can't allow it. Just like if I went into a crowded movie theater and yelled fire with no evidence of fire, that movie theater might ban me from their premises. Anytime former President Donald Trump decides to spout off this nonsense on his website blog, Representative Cheney responds. Before the January the 6th bit, before the impeachment regarding January the 6th, Representative Cheney sent around a summary to all House Republicans of the court cases, why they were dismissed, what the judges said. We have that. I'll be happy to provide it to you. If you come back to the YouTube channel in about 3-4 days, it'll be posted in the show comments, so you can follow the link and read it to your heart's content. But the short version is, it's bullshit. She's absolutely right to call it what it is. There's nothing here. And after she voted, one of 10, I believe it was, Republicans voted to impeach, at the time, President Trump, House Republicans started clamoring to get rid of her from the leadership position. Well, votes for this are anonymous. It's not like voting in Congress. You're not on record. So your voters don't know whether you voted to out her or not, to kick her out of her leadership position. And they voted by about 2/3, Republicans did, to keep her in her leadership position. Well, this week, Donald Trump opened his mouth via his fingers again. And Representative Cheney wrote an opinion piece for the Washington Post basically saying, this is not the Republican Party. We're a party in favor of democracy. And we're at a pivotal point in history about whether we're going to be a cult of personality around President Trump or whether we're going to go back to being the conservative party in the United States. And all hell broke loose. And now you've got the top Republicans, the two above her, in the House, either okay with getting rid of her because they're frustrated that she won't toe the party line about just ignoring Donald Trump and trying to pretend he doesn't exist, or outright saying she should be replaced. And of course, we know Donald Trump's got to be up in this mix because he can't keep his mouth shut about anything that's got his name in it. So, of course, he's advocating for her replacement too. And the leader of the House, for the Republicans, the minority leader, is in communication with Donald Trump, as we will establish. Smite Night, welcome in. We've got the sleeves rolled up, mug out. We're ready? Yes, sir, we are. We're about to dive right into it. Thanks for jumping in, man. I appreciate it. So how did all this start?
Now to a leadership shakeup in the GOP and a critical moment for Republicans. Internal divides over last year's election and the future of the party have again come to a head, as House Republicans seem to be moving to replace their number 3 leader. Lisa Desjardins has our report.
Hi, everybody.
A party leader, but for how long? House Republicans seem to have had enough of their conference chair, Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney, and within days are expected to oust her from leadership. It is a stunning turn of events in just 3 months.
The number one thing that happened at this conference was unity.
When Republican leader Kevin McCarthy and Cheney together resoundingly defeated another attempt to remove her.
We're not going to be in a situation where people can pick off any member of leadership.
In a secret ballot then, 2/3 of Republicans supported her, despite inter-party critics like Florida Representative Matt Gaetz, who flew to Cheney's home district to campaign against her.
You can send Liz Cheney home.
A staunch conservative and daughter of former Vice President Dick Cheney, the Congresswoman was seen as a rising star on the right when she won the leadership position back in 2018.
We will take a backseat to no one.
But that all changed after January 6th. Cheney was one of 10 House Republicans who joined Democrats in impeaching former President Donald Trump, charging that he played a role in the insurrection. Defending her vote, she released a blistering statement that President Trump lit the flame of attack.
The extent to which following January 6th, I don't believe that he should be playing a role in the future of the party or the country.
So her position seems pretty clear. Donald Trump lit the flame that led to the attack of January the 6th on the United States Capitol building, and she does not believe that he should be a part of the party or the country in terms of political discussion moving forward. It's hard to disagree with that. Had Trump not spread all his lies about the election not being secure and about election fraud costing him the presidential election, I am more than willing to listen to somebody who wants to make the case that January the 6th would have still happened. But without all of that, I don't see any reason why Americans would have stormed their own Capitol building. Quite obviously, as we've established in 60 plus court cases at this point, there's nothing to see in terms of election fraud. Hell, Trump's own official in charge of securing the election said that it was the most secure election we've ever had. But Trump can't buy into that, because that would expose what Trump is: a loser. He lost the election. Clearly, the rioters heard there was free MAGA merch inside the Capitol. Hilarious, but it looks like they brought enough of their own with them. I mean, just looking at the brief 3 seconds of photos and videos they showed there, I saw enough Trump flags and red hats to think that those folks don't need any more MAGA merch. But I agree with you. Obviously, the folks going in thought they were supporting President Trump. Continuing the story.
But President Trump has kept a commanding role in the party and continued to blast falsehoods about November, this week declaring it the fraudulent presidential election of 2020, trying to redefine the results as the big lie. On Twitter, Cheney fired back that anyone who claims the election was stolen is spreading the big lie and poisoning our democratic system. Now, fellow Republicans say she's gone too far.
I have heard from members concerned about her ability to carry out the job as conference chair.
McCarthy is openly asking whether Cheney can communicate the party's message. And in a comment made before a Fox News interview and leaked to Axios, McCarthy indicated his personal patience has run out.
I think she's got real problems. I've lost confidence. Well, someone just has to bring emotion, but I assume that will probably take place.
Cheney has defenders. On Twitter, Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger said she's being removed for telling the truth. And the Wall Street Journal editorial board wrote, purging Liz Cheney for honesty would diminish the party.
Get rid of them all.
But none of that outweighs the party's current standard bearer, who just yesterday called Cheney a warmongering fool with no business in Republican Party leadership. In the Washington Post, Cheney blasted back, writing, "This is a turning point for the party, that it needs to stand for conservative principles and steer away from the dangerous Trump cult of personality."
Elise Stefanik.
But Mr. Trump is moving on, endorsing an ally he pointed out at a 2020 rally, New York Representative Elise Stefanik. With Cheney on the outs, she's the favorite to become the sole woman in House GOP leadership.
So those two videos told you what this is really about. It's about the Republican House representatives trying to create unity within the Republican Party at the expense of reality. Donald Trump tweets or writes, rather, some BS about the election being stolen from him. Within the same week, Liz Cheney tweets back, "No, it wasn't. There's no evidence of this, and we need to be the party around democracy. We need to get back to our conservative principles." And Republican leadership, instead of saying, "Hey, yeah, you know, Representative Cheney is correct. We need to drop this lie about there being all this election fraud. There's been no proof of it." Instead of backing the person that's telling the truth, that's exposing Donald Trump lying, we got to back Donald Trump. We've got to pretend that the fantasy is real, because otherwise it might cost us some votes. We got to put our party ahead of reality. It's not about what's good for the country. It's about what's good for House Republicans. And Liz, Representative Cheney, isn't towing party line on this. So we got to get her out. Facts don't matter. The results of the lawsuits don't matter. The fact that the election has been confirmed at this point doesn't matter. The fact that we had multiple audits in multiple states, including hand-counted audits, in Republican states like Georgia, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that Donald Trump keeps spreading it to the best of his ability. All that matters is party unity within the Republican Party. And call me crazy, but I think reality should matter a little bit more than power for your party. I've said countless times before this that you can't let your ideology stand in the way of reality. And that's exactly what's going on here. Smite Knight, did you hear about his alternate Twitter account getting banned? I think it was something like "from the desk of Donald Trump." I briefly saw that, but I didn't dive into it too much. Good. I would consider letting Donald Trump back on Twitter if he's willing to come out and admit that this was all a bunch of lies. If he wants to follow the same terms of service all the rest of us do, he's welcome to use Twitter or Facebook with all the rest of us. Same standards. It's not that difficult. Personally, I think a president and a former president of the United States should be held to a slightly higher standard, but I would settle just for equal standards. The time for silence is over. Hey, thanks for the host, Mike. In a sick way, I kind of miss his tweets. They were truly amazing content generators. I agree. It was so much easier to run a politics stream when Donald Trump was tweeting out one batshit thing after the next. Controversy does drive content. Hell, my least productive call is my most viewed on YouTube because the guy came on and made an ass out of himself. But I think that's a big problem with our media right now, is that it's all trying to generate revenue. It's all for profit, right? So controversy and fighting gets a lot more views than just regular old governing. Politics and the presidency shouldn't be reality TV. And when we elected a reality TV star, we saw what we ended up with. huge problems handling a pandemic, a wall that Mexico was going to pay for to solve a problem that didn't need solving, that's been declining since Clinton in the first place. All that turned out to be horseshit. I still haven't seen a check from the government of Mexico paying for that wall. Batshit tweets 2, 3, 5 times a day about random crazy stuff. Politics isn't supposed to just be entertainment. Sure, amusing or funny things can happen, but that's not the goal. The goal should be to make the country better. Oh yeah, all of mainstream media has taken a dive in viewership following his departure. I would agree with that. So now we're going to look at some of the Republicans' responses to what's going on with Representative Cheney right now.
She's now under siege and calling out Trump. And today, Steve Scalise, the second most powerful House Republican, has joined the Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy in backing Congresswoman Elise Stefanik of New York to replace Cheney. Former President Trump agrees, today issuing a statement calling Stefanik, quote, a far superior choice, and she has my complete and total endorsement for GOP conference chair. She responded on Twitter thanking Trump for his 100% support. This afternoon, President Biden was asked about the implications of ousting Liz Cheney from her post in the House.
They're in the midst of a significant sort of mini revolution going on in the Republican Party. We badly need a Republican Party. We need a two-party system. It's not healthy to have a one-party system. And I think the Republicans are further away from trying to figure out who they are and what they stand for.
Meanwhile, the Republican leader in the Senate made a point of avoiding any kind of response about the situation in his party.
Are you going to do anything to help her keep her leadership position? And are you concerned at the overall kind of trend in the Republican Party that acknowledging that the election is valid can threaten, I guess, your position of power?
Yeah, 100% of my focus is on stopping this new administration.
Isn't it a concern that a sizable chunk of the Republican base doesn't believe that this election was valid?
100% of my focus is on standing up to this administration.
"100% of my focus is on standing up to this administration. I'm not going to answer your question because I made a speech on the Senate floor about how President Donald Trump did and was responsible for the insurrection attempt on January the 6th. But we can't talk about that right now because it might hurt the chances of more Republicans getting elected. Let's not worry about reality. Let's just worry about getting more Republicans elected. Let's not worry about that personal accountability that's supposed to be such a strong conservative trait. At least it was when I still identified as a Republican. Let's ignore what President Trump is saying and what he caused. Let's just obstruct Democrats from getting anything done and hope that everybody forgets about the January the 6th insurrection attempt when the midterm elections come around. Let's remove Liz Cheney from leadership so less people will pay attention to her correcting Donald Trump when he spouts his nonsense. And let's pull a Republican representative from the state of New York, Ms. Stefanik. Now, quite obviously, a lot of people are not going to have heard of Ms. Stefanik, and a lot of people aren't going to be familiar with her policies and what her voting record is as compared to Representative Liz Cheney's. I mean, I guess if Ms. Stefanik was more conservative, voted for more conservative policies and was a better representation of conservative values, I'd still disagree with both of them, but at least I could understand it. So let's take a look at that. So this is the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank who, like a lot of other think tanks out there, will rank different members of Congress and their voting records. The one you're probably most familiar with would be the NRA, and they will give representatives and senators a grade based on how good they are on firearms rights, Second Amendment rights. The Heritage Foundation does that for conservative ideology overall. Think of it as a grade for how conservative are you? And they list everybody. So we can compare. So let's go by state. There's Representative Cheney. She's got a 98% score overall, which is good if you're a conservative, right? And then let's scroll down to New York. I swear I am looking over her name. I thought it would have saved it, but apparently I had to research it again. So bear with me, everybody. There she is. 84% overall. And you can look at their specific votes on things and how they did. Now, in this particular instance, like I said, you can look at individual votes. You can look at co-sponsorships. The short version is Representative Cheney is more conservative than Representative Stefanik. So it's not about policy. It's not about Liz Cheney isn't conservative enough. It's not about Liz Cheney does not represent the Republican Party anymore. You can go to 538.com. Representative Cheney voted in favor of President Trump's policies more often than Representative Stefanik did. So it's not about policy. It's not about voting record. It's not about who's more Republican or who's more conservative, which at least I could understand. Because then you could make the argument, hey, Representative Stefanik represents the Republican Party better than Representative Cheney. The only difference between these two ladies is Representative Stefanik backs Trump's big lie. She doesn't call it out as false. So to move up in the Republican Party today, you have to buy the lie and deny reality. That's where we're at, folks. House Leader, Minority Leader, the time for silence is over. Thank you for the follow, Death of Certainty. Response.
On the Republican Party in the House, you are the #1 Republican in leadership. Steve Scalise is #2. Liz Cheney is #3. There are a number of reports out right now, Leader McCarthy, that some of your allies are saying we're unhappy with her in leadership because she voted to impeach President Trump, and now they're vowing a vote to get rid of her. What can you tell us about that?
No, there's no concern about how she voted on impeachment. That decision has been made. I have heard from members concerned about her ability to carry out the job as conference chair, to carry out the message. We all need to be working as one if we're able to win the majority. Remember, majorities are not given, they are earned. And that's about the message about going forward. Combating Joe Biden, what he's done to this border by making it unsecure and what's coming across. Just what he's doing here about small businesses, not opening schools, not getting us back to work, back to health, back to normal. That's the message we should be talking about. I haven't heard members concerned about her vote on impeachment. It's more concerned about the job ability to do and what's our best step forward that we can all work together instead of attacking one another.
Death of certainty. I'm digging the production value here. Very professional setup. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's been a lot of growth as we've gone to get it to what it is today. Hopefully what I'm saying is as of equal value as the production value, but I do appreciate the compliment. If it was about to rebut Leader McCarthy here, if removing Liz Cheney from her leadership role within the GOP was about pushing Republican conservative stances, why would you be replacing her with somebody who has a worse grade for voting conservative Republican values? If it wasn't about the insurrection, if it wasn't about telling Donald Trump to quit lying, if it wasn't about correcting Donald Trump's lies about the presidential election, if it was all about policy, why are you replacing with somebody who is graded as less conservative? And not just by the Heritage Foundation, mind you. It's not just them that disagree. You can go to the American Conservative Union Foundation that does the same thing as the Heritage Foundation. Lifetime rating, 78.03. Representative Stefanik, lifetime rating, 43.64. Representative Stefanik has been rated for 6 years. Representative Cheney has been rated for 4. Now, like I said, I'm going to disagree with them. That's why I'm using conservative sources here. I'm using conservative think tanks. You know, the ones that publish the data that Leader McCarthy and Senator McConnell in the Senate use to push their other policies, platforms, and positions. I'm not pulling a source from MSNBC or Americans for Progress or MoveOn.org. The conservative think tanks say when it comes to voting, when it comes to policies, Liz Cheney is substantially a better representative of the Republican Party than Representative Stefanik. Where these two disagree, again, is Representative Stefanik will not correct Donald Trump when he comes out spouting his lies about election fraud. That's it. So anybody who wants to tell you, including Leader McCarthy, that this is about anything else other than the impeachment vote and pushing back against President Donald Trump is flat lying to you. Now, if your friend who happens to be conservative tells you this, they may be misinformed. So try to take some charity when you're talking to them. But the talking heads, the leaders of the Republican Party that are telling you that this isn't about the impeachment, that this isn't about Donald Trump's lying, they know better. Smite Night, oh yeah, he's got a real good setup. The decal behind him is an actual wall-size print, not a green screen add-on. You were shook. If you go back to the older episodes on the website or the older episodes on YouTube, it was a green screen and there is a drastic difference. It was worth the investment. Death of certainty. What? Using data? What is this? Am I still on Twitch? I thought you were supposed to make shit up. I don't make shit up. And I've got a toll-free line down there for anybody who disagrees or thinks that I'm making shit up. That is open anytime I'm live on the air, brother. So if I made shit up, people can call in and call me out on it. And we've had tons of conversations on here. Likely Diamond, hey, welcome in, man. Or I think you're she, correct? Welcome in. I appreciate it. Happy Mother's Day if it applies to you. If not, tell it to your mom. Same goes to you, Smite Night and Death of Certainty. And anybody else that might be watching for that matter. Yeah, I'm terrible with the pronoun Smite Night. I am desperately trying to get better at it. Now, why is this such a big fight within the Republican Party? Anderson Cooper sent reporters up to Wisconsin, Wyoming, and different states to figure out what Republican voters think about the election. And this is why Republican leadership does not want to talk about it.
The splendor of Wyoming is plentiful. The number of residents is not. And that's why Wyoming only has one seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. So Liz Cheney represents every person in the state, like her or not.
Liz Cheney has proved herself to be a lousy representative of the voice of Wyoming.
And we spoke with a lot who are saying not.
Here's what Liz Cheney wrote. The Republican Party is at a turning point. History is watching. Whose side are you on, Liz Cheney or Donald Trump's?
Donald Trump. If she runs again, I will vote for her opponent.
I think she needs to go.
How come?
Just because I don't think she did the right thing for the Republican Party.
She says that Donald Trump is lying about the election being stolen.
I agree.
Agree with what?
I agree that the election was stolen.
There's no evidence of it.
Well, eventually it might come out.
In this dispute, do you think Liz Cheney has the right to be angry with Donald Trump?
No.
Why?
Because I don't think he's wrong.
Do you think the election was stolen?
I think it's possible, yeah.
John Curtis remains upset Representative Cheney voted to impeach Trump.
I read in the paper that she said she had to vote her conscience. Okay, maybe she's forgotten why she's there. Her conscience isn't why she was elected. She's supposed to be representing the people of Wyoming.
Sometimes this guy has a mask on and sometimes he doesn't. I wonder what the difference is in these interviews. I have no idea, but I agree with you. It was rather disconcerting to watch. Maybe some of them were taken after the CDC changed its recommendation on masks outside. That's my best guess, because usually CNN is pretty good about it. To speak to a few things that those voters said, the overarching theme is they support President Trump. You even heard a couple of them say, well, maybe we'll find out it was true someday. And another lady say it wasn't good for the party. I don't give a shit if it was good for your party or not. The insurrection attempt was bad for the country. and the country comes before your party. Period. Full stop. We're supposed to be doing, or trying to do, to the best of our ability, what is good for America and Americans, not just what is good for Republicans or Democrats. To speak to the last gentleman who said, well, Liz Cheney voted her conscience, but maybe she forgot that she's supposed to be representing us. You're partially correct, sir. But she also takes this nifty little oath when she takes office. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter. So help me God. When a sitting president encourages and sets the date for his supporters to storm the United States Capitol building on the day that they are constitutionally mandated to validate the results of the election that he lost, her oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that she swears when she takes that office, it takes precedence over voting the way you want her to. Because it's about what's good for the country, not about what's good for you or what's good for your party. But those voters represent and illustrate why Senator Mitch McConnell doesn't want to talk about it anymore, why House Representative Leader, Minority Leader McCarthy doesn't want to talk about it anymore, and why everybody in leadership in the Republican Party does not want to address or correct Donald Trump's lies about election fraud. Because there is a substantial base of the Republican Party that either believes it or wants to believe it. And those people vote. So it's not about reality anymore. It's not about what's good for the country. It's about what's good for getting Republicans elected and keeping Republicans in power. That mentality, party before country, party before reality, party in the face of evidence, that's why I left the Republican Party years ago. President Biden was right. A single-party state is not good. It's not good for democracy. I would argue for more than a two-party state, but with our current election system set up the way that it is, I understand that it's going to lean towards a two-party system. But we need a conservative party based in reality. Because to quote Ben Shapiro, facts don't care about your feelings. And if you can't base your opposition in reality, then I have zero interest in compromising with you. Because I don't compromise with fantasy. From Smite Night, we've got to get you set up on Discord, not for calls, but for outreach, community construction, stream announcements, etc. It's kind of where Twitch people live. I've noticed that. I'm a Discord boomer, man. If you want to help me through it, you are more than welcome. If you know somebody that's good at it that would be interested in managing it, hey, I'm all ears. Reach out to me afterwards or I'll catch you on your stream sometime. Eventually it might come out 10 years later. You got to wait, brother. It's going to come out from Likely Diamond. It's entirely accurate. that this is lying for the sake of lying and hoping that the cards fell the way that would benefit President Trump. That's all it was. And you can go back to my shows before the election results were announced. You can go back to my shows before the insurrection. In fact, I believe it's the one immediately before the insurrection where I was pleading with one of my friends, conservative friends, who watched the stream that was at the January the 6th rally not to go, and that if they went into the Capitol building to try and stall or overturn the results of the election, everybody who was formerly in the military's oath would kick in. We vote so that we can disagree without coming to violence. And when you encourage people to enact violence on behalf of politics, you and I have a serious disagreement. Hardwood and Sock, I would argue a bunch of the left lives in fantasy land. That might be true, but we don't tend to elect them to office. That's the difference. We're not removing or trying to remove our third-ranking member of Congress because they won't go along with Trump's lie about massive multi-statewide election fraud conspiracy. But welcome in the show. Death of Certainty and Hardwood and Sock talking back and forth. Yeah, Hardwood and Sock's called in a few times. Yeah, he's a great caller. Smite Knight, I swear the conspiracy theories have gotten so lame. No longer is it UFOs, Bigfoot, lizard people. No, it's Obamagate, voter fraud, etc. What a lame sequel. I agree. The aliens were more entertaining to me. They were also less dangerous. We didn't almost lose we didn't have a threat. I won't say almost lost. We didn't have a threat to our democracy or constitutional process because of the guy that thought that aliens abducted his, neighbor or himself or whatever the case was. And the guys that were all going to storm Area 51, they had more sense than the folks that stormed the Capitol. So that ought to tell you about the people we're dealing with here. Danger Dave Ball, the entirety of the right lives in a fantasy land. I don't think the entirety of the right lives in a fantasy land. I think you've got three sections right now that are fighting it out. You've got the ones that do live in fantasy land, the Marjorie Taylor Greens that think that the California wildfires were caused by Jewish space lasers. And I'm not making that up. You can go Google it right now. Okay. You've got her and the people that vote for her. You've got the ones like Leader McCarthy here who think that those people are useful because they vote Republican. So they're either willing to tolerate their existence or they're not willing to outright contradict what they're saying because they don't want to cost themselves votes. Okay. Those two are big problems to me. And then you've got the third wing of the Republican Party, which is like the Liz Cheneys right now that are saying, hey, none of the evidence supports this. None of this is based in reality. We need to correct that and get back to governing based off reality. And right now what we're seeing is the first two, the conspiracy nuts and the ones that are okay with the conspiracy nuts, are kicking out the ones that are trying to base policies in reality. That's a problem. And that's a problem that me, from the outside, as a progressive, I can't fix that. That's going to be up to the Hardwood and Socks of the world, a conservative who's called into this show multiple times and been extremely reasonable. Because as long as him and people like him keep voting for Republicans, well, if they keep kicking out the ones that are sane and basing their policies in reality and on evidence, that's going to leave you with the conspiracy theories and the ones that are okay with conspiracy theories, or at least not correcting conspiracy theories, as the ones representing your party. So from where I'm sitting, you got two choices, guys and ladies. You can start showing up in the primaries for the Republican Party and voting the nut jobs out and putting better people up there. I'm not even saying they've got to agree with me, but let's at least try to find ones that are grounded in reality. and ones that try to get rid of the ones that aren't grounded in reality. And if that fails, you need to vote for the opposition, because Republicans aren't going to learn. And again, I'm not talking your average voter. I'm talking about the Republican leadership are not going to change what they're doing right now until it starts costing them power. When it starts costing them elections, when comforting the conspiracy theorists starts costing them elections, for silence is over. Is when they'll change their positions. I have no idea how to say that, but thank you for the follow. The zone light, their zone light, I'm not sure. It flashed too briefly for me, but I appreciate the follow. Death of certainty, I would disagree that we can't help affect the Republicans rejoin reality. I think that a lot of reasons that many of them go to fantasy land is because they feel like they've been attacked and kicked out of society. They feel ostracized. I agree to a certain extent. I do agree. I think you're onto something there. Hey, yo, welcome back. The 01 light, I think that is. And thank you again for the follow. Hardwood and Sock, I appreciate that. I pride myself with being good faith. I do consider you good faith. Just call you Zero? Got it. Call you Zero. Easy to do. Likely Diamond, that's a very dramatic notification. It's taken from my intro and my exit video. When we reach the break, for me to go get more coffee, I'll play the intro and the exit trailer, and you'll see where it's coming from. But yes, it is. Zeroed. So I take callers. Yes, I do, but I do it after we've gone through this section of making the case. Today, callers will be on the filibuster, which was last week's show. Filibuster reform, abolish it, reform it, or keep it the same, right? Or today's current show, which is going to be centered around Liz Cheney. So unless I limit discussion to this week and last week, so we can both have evidence prepared. If you disagree with what I'm saying this week, but you don't have the evidence with you, the line will be open, toll-free next Sunday as well. And like I said, you are more than welcome to go collect it and come back. The time for silence Danger is over. Dave Ball, thank you for the follow. I greatly appreciate it. The left speaks best quality is his ability to translate left policies to conservatives. I'm blown away by the ease of that transition. Otherwise, or obviously other good qualities. Thank you. I try. It takes a lot of work sometimes, but I think it helps that I was born in the Deep South. And I mean, really, I was for a long period of time what you would consider like, you know, the poster child for Republican stuff. I was born and raised in Louisiana. I went out to honor military school. I knocked on doors for, you know, George Bush's first election term, served in the military, got out, and then evidence and research slowly changed my mind. And that's the reality of it. It took you by surprise, likely. Sorry about that. Zero, I'm quite unfortunately a leftist, but I'm absolutely up to discuss how to help conservatives if I accept calls. Yes, I do. And leftists are more than welcome to call in. Conservatives always get priority, however, because I don't want it to turn into an echo chamber. I think we have enough echo chambers out there, and this is very much trying to be something different. But you are more than welcome to call in when we reach that spot. It'll be after the break. I'll let you know. But again, if there's a conservative viewer, because I've got 5 lines open at any given time, and I can expand that if this ever gets bigger, right? But conservatives are always going to get priority. People who disagree with me are always going to get priority. Even if you disagree from the left, anybody who disagrees gets priority, because I'm not trying to create an echo chamber. I think that's one of the biggest problems we have right now, is that conservatives and leftists, I won't say liberals, even though most conservatives would understand that as leftists, because there's a lot more leftists than just liberals. I think we have a tendency, both of us, to stay in our own bubble and not talk to each other. So this is all about trying to get people to talk to each other. Likely Diamond, no, it was a good surprise. Good, I'm glad. Left Speaks, you're speaking lots of truth here. I'm really digging what you're doing. Color, you impressed? I'm colorblind, so you don't want me to color you at all, but I see what you're saying and I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm just trying to do what I can do. I would encourage all of us to do that. So back to Liz Cheney.
The splendor of Wyoming is plentiful. The number of residents is not. And
now, it's not just voters who are against her. There are voters who are for her. Listen to what some of them say and how they justify still being for her, especially the last person they interview, who is a leader of the Republican County Commission, I believe it is, in that state.
But there are plenty of people we've met here who very much like Liz Cheney's conscience.
I just think she doesn't divide her thoughts along political lines. She speaks her truth, and I appreciate somebody with that type of integrity.
Absolutely no doubt in my mind that Liz Cheney has the right answers and Donald Trump has the wrong answers.
Van Melblom is 95 years old and one of the relatively rare Wyoming Democrats, but she admires Cheney.
Because she stands for truth and a better Republican Party. And we do have to have two parties.
Thank you, Mark.
The Wyoming Republican Party voted in February to censure Liz Cheney. And here in the state's largest county of Laramie, the county Republican Party also voted to censure her. But that vote was nowhere near being unanimous.
Do you find this discouraging, this dispute?
Yeah, I do.
Kylie Taylor is the vice chairwoman of the Laramie County Republicans. She was elected to her post in March, so didn't participate in the censure vote. She stresses the following is her personal opinion.
I think that you got to respect Cheney, and she's telling her truth and what she believes to be true. She's not backing down. She's not going out quiet. And I think for myself as a woman in politics and watching her as a woman in politics, it's something that I respect.
So does that mean you do not respect what Donald Trump is trying to do to her?
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
So Kylie, and there was another lady earlier in that segment, both of whom are on the side of Representative Cheney. But there's a key phrase that they both mentioned that points out the problem with the thinking on this. I respect Representative Cheney for putting her truth out there. Her truth. Truth isn't individual. Reality doesn't just live inside your individual head. If there was evidence for Trump's big lie about election fraud across the country in multiple states, in dozens to hundreds of counties, in hundreds to thousands of polling locations, that evidence wouldn't just exist in somebody's head. It wouldn't be just true for you and not true for me. Gravity is real. It doesn't matter whether I drop the pen or you drop the pen. I'm not going to drop my coffee cup because I happen to like that coffee cup. But true for you or true for me is something I reject outright. There is such a thing as objective fact. And you can demonstrate it, you can show it to other people. If something is true, you can show it to somebody else. It's not about true for you. So I'm glad that these people agree with Representative Cheney. But we need to get back to objective facts here, Republicans. There are some on the left that are guilty of this too. But we're not the ones trying to kick out our third highest ranking House member and strip them of their leadership position because they're pointing to objective reality. Republicans are the ones doing this right now. So if you voted Republican last time and you think that it's bullshit, you need to call your representative and your senator and tell them that if they don't help back Liz Cheney in this, if they don't help get the Republican Party back to reality, that you're going to quit voting for them. Because they've already told you this is about maintaining power for the Republican Party. Death of certainty. I don't know. In online communities, the left 100% kicks people out. I understand that's a very specific problem, but I do worry about it spilling out into electoral politics. I think both sides do that. If you go on Reddit, Reddit, an online forum for those who are not familiar, there's a conservative subreddit that specifically locks some of their threads to conservatives only or proven conservatives only, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's not a left specific thing to me. But again, that's one of the things this show is trying to avoid. I want to get people talking to each other. In the conservative subreddit, on Reddit overall, on that online forum, I can somewhat understand it because Reddit tends to lean more left. So they don't want to just get overloaded with people that disagree with them. But it's hard to make the case that only leftists do that. So that would be my only correction on that. I don't, again, from Death of Certainty, I don't, oops, I lost it. I don't consider myself a centrist at all, though, and I'm definitely more liberal than left. I think I'm kind of in between liberal and left. I identify as a progressive. The short version for me is I'm going to go wherever the evidence leads. I don't really I advocate consistently against putting whatever ideology you hold over reality. If somebody can point to evidence and facts and data and, logical argumentation and reasoning that I'm wrong, and I can't find better evidence, arguments, reason, etc., then I will change my position. Ricky the Great One. Hey, welcome in, brother. It's good to see you. Welcome back. As a general leftist, I don't generally kick people out for disagreeing. Trolling is tolerated in certain stream topics, but banned in more serious ones. I haven't had to ban anyone, but I've been lucky in that regard. We did have one person who called in and showed his ass, and I think he showed up the next stream, and the auto mod timed him out, but I haven't had to ban anyone yet. Smite Knight, I identify as SocDem for practical purposes, but I'm leaning more towards anti-capitalist. I can see a use for markets, so I'm not anti-capitalist. I do think we desperately need to get capitalism more regulated again. I think we're in a very similar position to where we were when Teddy Roosevelt came to power in the United States. Back then it was the Industrial Revolution, and everything had become monopolized. You had, U.S. Steel and U.S. Oil and all these big corporations that controlled everything, and the workers were getting, screwed over, for lack of a better way to put it. And we needed to come in and break up the super monopolies, and we needed to create competition within capitalism again, and we need to regulate the worst abuses of capitalism and all that sort of stuff. I think we're seeing, the technological revolution or the internet revolution or whatever term you want to use right now, and we're seeing the same thing, whether it's Amazon, Twitter, Facebook, whoever, right? We're seeing these super big conglomerate monopoly corporations, and we need to do the same thing again. I think that's where we're at. Workers need more rights, and we desperately need to rebalance it. That's the short version of me. The profit motive is a great and terrible tool. It can do a lot of good, and it can do a lot of shitty things too, from Death of Certainty. I completely agree. You can be anti-capitalist and still believe in markets. Yes, I agree as well. There needs to be more reins on capitalism. Socialism would need mechanisms to rein in its excesses too, I am sure, from Death of Certainty. I agree. I think that what will ultimately work is taking the best outcomes and goals from each system and tools from each system, right, and each ideology, and melding it into what works. And this is why I've said consistently, don't let reality, or don't let your ideology override reality, right? Follow the evidence, follow the arguments, which is why instead of just saying, hey, I'm, this or that or this or that, I want to talk about specific policies, because that's what gets us where we need to go, right? Specific policies. Let's find the best policy for this. Let's find the best policy for this. Let's find the best policy for this. We put it together and we can get there together as Americans. That's how we make America great again. Talking to each other and not being scared of answers and positions, but diving into them and finding out what the truth of the situation is, which is why the Republicans going after Liz Cheney for pointing out reality is very disturbing to me. Any market needs regulations unless you're a libertarian, in which case find me a completely free market that works. I'll wait. I agree. Libertarianism sounds great in theory until you realize that it basically leads to feudalism. Ricky the Great One, super capitalism. Yeah, that was a hilarious video. Death of Certainty. Yo, yeah, we need to get this guy more exposure at Smite Night. He needs to go talk to some of these young whippersnapper Twitter kids. Thank you. I appreciate it. You're more than welcome to retweet, share, like, and share on social media, and not just in leftist or progressive circles. Like I said, I want the conservatives to be a part of the conversation. That's my ultimate driving goal. Back to Liz Cheney.
So, yeah, this isn't about conservatism or even really supporting Trump's agenda while in office. This is about Liz Cheney drawing a line in the sand over the events of January 6th, as well as the run-up to that day and its aftermath, all centered on Trump arguing, despite all available evidence, that the 2020 election was stolen. And yes, of course, Stefanik voted to object to the Electoral College count in Pennsylvania on the same day that the Capitol was overrun by Trump-inspired rioters. The only difference, other than that Cheney has a far more conservative voting record than Stefanik, between these two women is that the former isn't willing to promulgate Trump's big lie about the 2020 election, and the latter is just fine with it. As Ohio Republican Congressman Anthony Gonzalez, a Republican who, like Cheney, voted to impeach Trump after January 6th, told the Hill newspaper recently of Liz Cheney, quote, "If a prerequisite for leading our conference is continuing to lie to our voters, then Liz is not the best fit. Liz isn't going to lie to people. Liz is going to say what she believes. She's going to stand on principle. And if that's going to be distracting for folks, she's not the best fit. I wish that weren't the case," end quote. Well said. And that is the point. We make new point episodes every Tuesday and Thursday.
So out of all the Republicans who came out, again, I'm not talking about the individual voters here, not the individual conservative voters. I'm talking about the leadership. Senator McConnell, House Leader McCarthy, second-ranking House member Scalise for the Republicans. None of them came out and were like, yeah, Liz is just completely wrong on this. There completely was massive multi-statewide election fraud, and it was all a conspiracy, and Joe Biden's not really the president, and President Trump's really still the president. None of them are saying that. They're just saying, don't correct the people that believe that. Don't tell them they're wrong. This is about unity for Republicans so we can win the majority again. And they're trying to remove Representative Cheney from her leadership position because she's not comfortable with her fellow Republicans and Republican voters either believing lies or being silent when the lies are spoken. That's what we're down to here. The person they're putting up to replace her is less conservative from both rankings from the American Heritage Foundation. And what was the other one? The American Conservative Union? Yeah, American Conservative Union. If speaking the truth and correcting lies and correcting conspiracy theories excludes you from being a leader of the Republican Party. How am I wrong from the outside when I point at the Republican Party, when I point to my friends who are conservative and say, y'all are voting for a bunch of conspiracy theories. Y'all are the party of conspiracy theorists. Y'all are the party of fantasy, not reality. I'm not the one removing the people from leadership who are correcting the conspiracy theorist. Your party is doing that. I'm not the one telling my leadership that they can't speak truth. Your party is doing that. How much worse does it have to get before you start either voting differently or jumping in the primaries and getting rid of these people that are okay with support from the conspiracy theorist, that are okay with letting the nut jobs like Marjorie Taylor Greene spout off whatever they want to say and never correcting them, that are okay with the Matt Gaetzes of the world screaming that on the House floor that it was Antifa, all decked out in MAGA gear and Trump flags, coming from the Trump rally as directed by President Trump to storm the Capitol building. Hardwood and Sock, how late am I going to be streaming? Driving home, I'd love to call on this topic. I honestly don't know. I'm about to hit the break point, and then we will see. It is Mother's Day, obviously, so it's probably going to be a shorter stream than normal. But depending on how long your ride is, you may have time to call in. After Shark, hey, welcome in. Welcome back. I appreciate it. Good to see you. Last one, wrapping up on Liz Cheney, and then we're going to take the break. Excuse me, two more. This isn't just happening to Liz. This is Mitt Romney.
Here at the Utah Republican Party State Convention, Senator Mitt Romney was loudly booed by delegates. He's faced anger and backlash over his votes to impeach President Trump. Let's go ahead and play back what happened.
Please, thank you. Show respect. Okay, Senator, thanks, Derek. Thanks, Derek. So, yeah, I understand that I have a few folks that don't like me terribly much, and I'm sorry about that, but I express my mind as I believe is right, and I follow my conscience as I believe is right. And I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of the current president's policies.
Utah's junior senator did get some cheers, but I'm told as soon as his speech finished, he left the Maverick Center.
Smite Night, oh God, I saw this, all that booing, so amazing. I agree if it wasn't for the fact that they were booing Mitt Romney for not backing the big lie. Hardwood and Sock, Trump never said storm the Capitol. You're correct. He never said storm the Capitol. He said, we're going to march down to the Capitol building and I will be right there with you. And I believe that's a direct quote, but you're more than welcome to look it up. Of course, he didn't go because Trump is a coward and kind of knew what was going to happen. But you don't get to set the day after lying for months about election fraud, massive multi-statewide election fraud conspiracy theory here, and then set the day for everybody to show up follow a speaker on the same podium who advocates for trial by combat and then tell your supporters to march down to the Capitol building while saying fight 6 or 7 times and then go, oh shit, who could have wondered? Who could have imagined that they would go down there angry and that something bad would happen? That doesn't fly for me. I don't think it flies for any reasonable person if we put party loyalty and politics aside. Sic Semper Tyrannis. Hey, welcome in. I think I made a comment back to you one time on one of the YouTube videos. I appreciate it. Rhinos get booed. If you're calling Mitt Romney a rhino, your party nominated him for president to run against Barack Obama. If even he is now a rhino because he pointed out that President Trump helped cause the insurrection, I would argue that you are putting party over country, my friend. You are putting loyalty to the Republican Party over reality. That would be my argument. But I appreciate you being here. You're more than welcome. At Hardwood, or from Ricky the Great One, if you get done with a date with a young lady, you're walking her to her door, she invites you up for coffee. Is she really talking about coffee? It's possible to say something without saying it. It's even worse than that, though, because if she invites you up to her door and makes a few minutes speech mentioning the word sex 6 times, you know, like Trump did with the word fight, I think it's pretty obvious the idea she's trying to put in your head and make sure that you understand. Again, call me crazy. Aftershock, several people who stormed the Capitol explicitly said that they believed they were doing what Trump asked them to do. Correct. You are absolutely correct in that. They did. And that's just in case, you know, the tons of flags and all the red hats didn't give it away. Or the fact that Trump told them to go there in the first place. Yeah, that's a bad example because if she invites, from Death of Certainty, at Ricky the Great One, yo, that's a bad example because if she invites you up for coffee and you just assume it's sex, I'd get some direct consent first before assuming. Yeah, I would agree. But the Trump supporters didn't wait for direct explicit orders besides march to the Capitol and tell them what they thought. Argos, welcome back. Appreciate it. Resist the social manipulation by politicians. Why else would the Republican Party be angry? They've finally found an opposing party that can manipulate people better than themselves. Might need to clarify there. Are you saying Democrats are better at manipulating people than Republicans are? Because right now the Republicans are pointing to election fraud that they don't have evidence of. And when their third ranking member in the House of their party says, no, we have no evidence of this and it's bullshit, they're trying to remove her. I don't see the Democrats doing people or, you know, removing people from positions of leadership for pointing to reality. Ricky the Great One, example for a movie. Death of Certainty, I get the joke, but I'm just saying exactly. Yeah. All right, guys, we're going to take a 5-minute break and I will play the intro trailer when we get back and then phone lines will be open. If there are no callers, then we're going to wrap up because it is Mother's Day. So during the break, if you haven't already, take a few minutes, text your mom, tell her Happy Mother's Day. If that's the least that, or if that's the most that you can do. Even if you forgot to buy flowers, take the time, text your mother. It's a hard job. And they deserve a lot of credit. And at least one day, of thanks a year. The time for silence is over. Clark Draper, thank you for the follow. Everybody, we will be back in 5 minutes. the time for silence is over. There was once an unprecedented time in American history when common citizens of their day began to define the rights of man and documented how those rights were being violated by their current government. They wrote to each other. They debated with each other. Ultimately, it was these common citizens who recorded these rights for all eternity, and furthermore created a new and free nation founded on these rights with liberty and justice for all of its citizens. Times have changed, but these rights remain.
I don't take responsibility.
That all citizens have the right to life. That all citizens have the right to pursue happiness. That all citizens are created equal. That all citizens have the right to a public trial. That all citizens have the right to peacefully assemble. That all citizens have the right to petition their government. What happens when you try to exercise these rights today? Is this government honoring your rights? Or are they violating them? Is this the government that those citizens aspired to? There is a solution.
I don't take responsibility. I don't take responsibility. I don't take responsibility.
Join me every Sunday afternoon for a new show where common citizens, you and I together, discuss with each other issues of today, where we demand proof and evidence is required, where we seek the truth and will not be silent. Join me this coming Sunday afternoon and take part in America's oldest and most honored tradition. Welcome back, everybody, and thank you for sticking with me through the break. Had to get a refresher on the coffee. Catch up on chat real quick. From Likely Diamond, mothers are great. I absolutely agree. Death of Certainty, agreed with that. See, we've already found common ground, hopefully, between leftists and conservatives, Democrats and Republicans in this country. Mothers are a good thing. Marcus, how are you today? Or how are you these days? I'm doing excellent. Thank you for dropping in, man. I appreciate it. Ricky the Great One, is anyone else's audio glitching out every now and again? It is clean from my side. I'm showing no dropped frames. Looks like Death of Certainty has no issues either. So maybe refresh the stream. I don't know what to tell you, brother, but it looks clean on my side. Death of Certainty, the soundtrack makes this whole video. Thank you. I agree. I have to pay for it, but it's worth it because it's an excellent audio track. Smite Knight, he goes for all the drama, I believe that is, and I'm here for it. I appreciate you being here every time. I try to go for the facts, whatever those may be, but I do not hide my position and my opinion on those facts, and I do not hide the facts that I am drawing on to support my position. Argos, eliminate parties and have nothing but independence, freedom. You're not wrong, but, and don't let the but erase everything I said in front of it. With the way our current political system is set up, where if you win, the time for silence is over. Thank you for the follow, Colonel Bob Shaw. The way our system is set up, where if you win, you get all of the representation, is almost going to necessitate, it is always going to lead to political parties. And it is almost always going to lead to two political parties. I believe it was George Washington who was opposed to political parties. But if one side organizes into a party and your side remains unorganized, you're not going to receive nearly as much representation as you would if you organized. And since if you get 30% of the vote, but the other side gets 51, that side that got 51 gets all of the representation. It doesn't make sense to split your vote. That's why we keep ending up with two parties and have throughout the majority of American history. You'll see a third party pop up every now and again, but it either becomes the dominant party or it gets co-opted by one of the dominant parties. That's how Republicans rose to power initially, right? They were the third party, but they became the dominant party, one of the two dominant parties. And that's why you keep seeing this trend. So without changing the American electoral system, specifically that first past the post bit, that whoever wins gets all of the representation, you're almost always going to see America default to two parties. That's why in other countries, you will see other solutions to this problem, like proportional representation, where if 30% of the population votes for a random party, that random party gets 30% of the votes in their parliament or Congress or whatever the case is. But that's why in America, you always see us default to two parties. Ricky the Great One, it was probably me. Sorry, but I'm glad it was just you and not everybody else. Six Semper Tyrannis, you're good? Good, I'm glad. Ricky the Great One, do I have to pay for it each time I play it? No, each episode, and it's not pay per play. I'm signed up with a website as the short version, so I have the rights to it, audio-wise. Oh, Six Semper, you were letting him know you were good audio-wise. I appreciate the feedback. Thank you much. I appreciate it. Argos, therefore, we should find methods, systems, and tools to resist the natural evolution of two-party inclinations. I don't disagree with you, but you would be talking about fundamentally reforming the American electoral system is the problem. The easiest way to do this is probably going to be ranked choice voting, which is basically where instead of going and voting for one person, right, you wouldn't pick just Bob Smith, right? You could say Bob Smith is my number one choice. You know, Mary Johnson is my number two. John Davies is my number three, whatever the case is, right? And then whoever got the most overall score would be who won that district. And that would open it up to third-party choices more than what is currently the case. You see this in Maine right now. There's some other states that have tried it on local levels. But if you want to get rid of parties, like, you know, hard set parties, it wouldn't get rid of all parties, but it would at least break the two-party setup. That's probably your best choice in what you want to push for. And you can start that at a local level, and then as it works, it'll continue to filter up to the higher levels. That's generally how American democracy proceeds. I'm just going to go with Colonel because I think you're trying to go for Colonel Bob Shaw. Why am I not exposing the globalist inside the blue donkeys? Why am I not talking about globalist inside of the Democratic Party? Because they're in both parties. And by globalist, I mean those that advocate for global trade and stuff like that. I don't see putting that genie back in the bottle, and I don't see global trade as a bad thing, though I do think it needs to be regulated right now. Argos, the world is already globalist. Catch up with the rest of us. Yes, exactly. Ricky the Great One, globalism can be done correctly. I agree. You remember both the Democrats and Republicans pushing the sheet. Oh, the shit show. You can cuss it. Well, the mod might have caught you. Pushing the shit show, think globally, act locally. I remember the slogan. I don't remember specifically who pushed it. It wouldn't surprise me. But yes, if you start at a local level, you're going to implement more change faster than if you try and do everything from a national level. You and I can act individually on a local level much easier than we can just march into Congress. Hypercapitalism is a problem. Being global enables this. I think it's lame to think that not being global would reduce hypercapitalism. Argos, also ranked choice voting heart. Yeah, I think that's the way to go, Argos. I think one of the big things we're seeing right now in regards to global trade, and again, to go back to Teddy Roosevelt and kind of the end of the Industrial Revolution, during that time period, or prior to that time period, you saw a lot of state economies, but you didn't really see a national economy. Like companies were more localized. And then basically they outgrew the bounds of the individual state governments to regulate them. Okay, if you don't, want us here, well, we'll pay a few fines here, whatever the case is, and we'll just, we've got this massive country worth of economy to draw on, so we can survive you being a little bit of a jackass, Kansas, for instance, right? And they could just override at the state level. I think you're seeing a lot of the same thing at the global level now, right? You are seeing companies that used to be regulated nationally. Now they can jump to global. Okay, you want to regulate the way that we, pay our workers? Fine, we'll just move all of our factories over to China or to Mexico or wherever the case is. And I think we're going to have to establish some international regulations. Not necessarily an international government. I'm not pushing for that. I'm very strongly American and pro-America, right? But you're seeing multinational companies that have outgrown the ability for one individual nation to regulate them by itself. That's why the trade agreements and multinational agreements and all those things are so important right now, because you have to get the regulations on the same level that the companies are playing with, or you have to break the companies back down so that they're playing on the local level. Globalism is designed to destroy culture and ethnicity of groups. I don't see that being the case. You're talking about global trade right now. That's it. And from an American point of view, considering we have had people and immigrants from all around the world, whether it's Irish or Italian or British or German or Mexican or from Africa or Japanese or Chinese, they have all integrated successfully into American culture. They weren't destroyed. They became part of and added to American culture. And every time we have seen a huge immigrant block from a country that we're not familiar with having a huge block of immigrants from, a certain segment of this country freaks out and starts saying how they're not going to integrate into our American culture. And every time, consistently, they have been wrong. We've done this with Irish Americans when they came over right around the time of the Civil War. We did it with Italian Americans. And now we're doing it with South and Central America immigrants who are trying to migrate to this country. It's the same problem repeating itself. History may not repeat itself exactly, but it rhymes very often, and we have seen this countless times in American history. Argos, that's called paranoid conspiracy theory. Or just misinformed. I try to be charitable where I can. The leaders of the Republican Party for this episode, right? I know that they know that they're full of shit. Okay? And I can prove that. But the individual conservative, remember I was trying to tell everybody to be charitable when you're trying to, they may not be informed on that issue. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. So try and meet people where they're at. And as long as they're willing to engage civilly and honestly, lay out your evidence and your arguments, and let's see if we can move everybody to truth. That's how we make America great again. Back to the main topic, America's two-party system. America's two-party system isn't actually the main topic. The main topic is about Liz Cheney, but we're in the section of the show where I pretty much engage with chat. So most things are good as long as you don't dive off into stuff that would violate terms of service. Back in the 1800s, the Federalist was the strength of American politics. Yeah, there was a Federalist Party. There was a Whig Party. We've had several different parties. Argos, the Republicans have lost their center bearing and how they are a party that helps people. Thus, they're creating more problems than they're solving. We all need to reduce the impact of parties like the confused GQP, not GOP, and their illegitimate authority. I think a lot of members of the Republican Party are putting party over country or self-benefit over country. They are worried that the people that vote or that buy into these QAnon conspiracies, for lack of a better example, those people vote, right? And they vote Republican. QAnon's not voting for Democrats. And they're worried about losing their votes. And it's not about whether it's good for the country or not. They're worried about losing their votes and losing their power as a result. In a lot of ways, it seems like the majority of leadership in the Republican Party is just trying to view Trump as, you know, the crazy old aunt or crazy old mother-in-law that lives in the attic. We know she's there, but we don't talk about her. And that seems to be what they're trying to do with Trump. Instead of addressing him, we'll just let him write his little blog and we'll ignore everything he says. And that's why they're mad at Representative Cheney. Because she keeps saying, hey, there's a crazy lady in the attic and we need to fix it, instead of ignoring it. That's my gut impulse on what's really going on in those circles. I can't prove that. The Democrats, Republicans were one party fighting the Federalists. We need to return the Federalist as a party. Feel free. I'm not going to be able to create a party just from the ground up. I think the most logical conclusion for those that are more progressive like myself is just like the Tea Party co-opted the Republican Party to co-opt the Democratic Party from inside and make it reflect what I think this country needs. I think that's the best path forward. If you disagree with me and you want to start a party from scratch, nobody's stopping you. Government's not going to come in and shut you down. So go do it. Likely Diamond asking Colonel Bob Shaw, do you believe Liz Cheney should just be expulsed from the Republican Party? Argos, exactly about the GQP, exactly right about the GQP. They know they're full of shit. 100% agree. Yeah, I think that, like I said, I think there's a segment of the Republican Party right now that finds or that really honestly believes this shit, right? And I don't think that's the majority. But I think there's a larger segment of the Republican Party that finds it useful to pretend as if they believe this stuff. And when you add those two together, that makes the majority of the Republican Party right now. That's the problem I have. There's a small minority of the Republican Party that's outright saying, hey, this is nuts. The election was fair. There wasn't, some massive multi-state-wide conspiracy across, thousands of polling locations against Donald Trump that we just magically can't find substantial evidence of. That's the minority of the Republican Party right now, and that's a problem. Ricky the Great One, at Likely Diamond, yes, let them rip themselves apart and burn the GOP to the ground. Hashtag dancing in ashes. The problem with that is when the Tea Party got co-opted, or when the Tea Party was first forming, and then when it became not about what the Tea Party originally started about and started veering more massively right-wing, that's who ultimately won, because the establishment Republicans weren't willing to give up their power. There's a very real chance, and that's kind of what we're watching right now, if even the assault on the Capitol wasn't enough for establishment Republicans to come out and say, I can't support this anymore, I'm very concerned that whatever is enough, by that point, it's going to be too late. Argos, for decades, the neocons have ruled the GOP all the way back to Nixon. It would depend on your definition of neoconservative, to be honest with you. I think Reagan would be a good point to draw a line to where they started changing into more of the keep spending and just cut taxes. But It would depend on how you define neoconservative. Argos, Cheney is being American first, party second. I like that. Yes, on this issue, she is. And if your party isn't for putting the country over your party, then it's not a party that I can vote for. Cheney is grounded in neocon thinking. Trump is against that belief, from Colonel Bob Shaw. I don't disagree with you, and I don't agree with Liz Cheney on a lot of things. I'm not in favor of forever wars over in the Middle East. I'm not in favor of us invading Iraq with weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist. And she's come out in favor of those positions. That's not just me holding the sins of her father against her. The problem is that's not why Republicans are removing her from her position. And I think you tuned in a little bit late, so you might have missed it. The short version is, as rated by the Heritage Foundation and the American Conservative Union, Liz Cheney is more Republican, more conservative, and voted more in line with Donald Trump more often than the person they are trying to replace her with, Representative Stefanik. The only difference between the two is that Stefanik backed the big lie. She voted to contest the Pennsylvania election results, whereas Liz Cheney has consistently come out against this. So I may disagree with Liz Cheney on plenty of things, and I certainly do. But at least she can point to reality on this issue. And I can talk to people that start at reality, that start at evidence and facts, and we can get somewhere. Hell, we can reach compromises, but I can't compromise with fantasies. That's the difference here. Ricky the Great One, yeah, go make your own Amazon. Ha, yeah. Argos, again, I'm going to continue encouraging independence. This trend of well-informed, humble, and consistent growth of independence will, by natural course, help improve our choice and ability to address problems like the GQP. I will continue to encourage civil conversation with anybody, regardless of where they're starting out, as long as we can start at reality and be civil with each other. I don't give a damn about the labels. If somebody wants to call themselves a Democrat, a Blue Dog Democrat, a Republican, a Tea Party Republican, a communist, a socialist, a fascist, I don't care what they identify as long as we start at reality and start working our way from there. Because we've all been wrong about countless things in our lives. And we've all learned from other people throughout our lives. But if all we ever listened to was the people that told us what we already think is right, nobody ever learns anything. If my 5-year-old thought 2 + 2 = 17, and he never heard anybody explain why 2 + 2 = 4, and he only listened to everybody that told him that 2 + 2 = 17, he's going to be wrong for a lot longer than if he actually engaged with people who disagreed with him. But like I said, you have to start with evidence. We have to start with reality. And these people that are pushing the big lie about massive multi-statewide election fraud costing President Trump the election, we're not starting at reality. And the fact that the Republican Party wants to oust Liz Cheney from her leadership position because she's pointing out the fact that it's not reality is very concerning. And it's going to take Republicans and the people who can vote in Republican primaries, like independents such as yourself, to get that to change. All I can do is point out the problem. So what really happened with the Federalist as a party? I can't answer that off the top of my head. I would have to go back and look it up, to be honest with you. great differentiation of the Republican Party and those that believe that the paranoid conspiracy theorists. The Republican Party needs an out. They've painted themselves into a corner from Argos. Thank you. The Republican Party's out is going to cost them votes. I mean, that's the short version. And it's going to cost them power in the short term. And that's another reality. I think it's fortunate, but if I put my old conservative hat back on, it's an unfortunate reality if I put my old conservative hat back on, right? But you can't keep indulging fantasy just to get your way. It's not, we're seeing where it leads. And it's bad for the Conservative Party long term. They keep getting outvoted more and more and more in presidential elections. And the only reason they keep winning the occasional presidential election is because of the Electoral College. But they keep losing by larger and larger margins when you go to the popular vote. This isn't sustainable long term unless you keep trying to rig the system. So return to reality would be my argument. You're turning off a lot of people with this kind of stuff. All right, I'm going to jump a few. 6 Semper Tyrannis. The young conservatives are further right, so be careful what you want. If the GOP is gone, the populist right will rise out of the ashes. I don't want the GOP gone. I want the GOP to return to reality. I think conservatives have valuable things to contribute to any political conversation. Sometimes progressives and those on the left can want to move too fast before they iron out any problems, or they want to spend too much money, right? And I think it's valuable to have somebody in there that says, hey, hold up. We need to look at this. We need to think about that. We need to do this, whatever the case is. But it's got to be based in reality. That's what I'm arguing for. From Smite Knight, Left Speaks, are you multi-streaming? Yes, I am. Twitch, YouTube, Facebook. ROI226, have I heard about Sheikh Jarrah? No, I haven't. And the subject today is not on it, so I can't speak to it. So jump to another topic, brother. Argos, ROI226, don't change the subject. Thank you. You beat me to it. Colonel Bob Show, responding to Likely Diamond. No, I don't agree with Cheney being banned or replaced. Then call your representatives and your Republican congressmen and tell them that if she is removed, you will vote against them in the next primary. I'm not even saying you got to vote for a Democrat, but tell them you'll vote against them in the next primary. If Republicans want to return their party to sanity, it's going to have to be you guys. Or you're going to have to go the route I did and leave the party. But I know some of you aren't there yet. But at a minimum, we should be able to agree that basing our policies, or that our leaders should base their policies in reality. And it seems like you agree with that. So if you've got Republican House representatives, call them, email them, send them a tweet on Twitter. Because it's going to have to cost them power for them to get back to reality. From Ricky the Great One, the reality is that the populists were treated as redheaded stepchildren of the Republican ticket for years. Trump brought them in from the cold, and now we're facing the repercussions of poor social safety nets and an unwillingness to address issues at a systemic level. I think the Tea Party was a huge swell of populism within the Republican Party because they were feeling left behind by a lot of neoliberal policies and neoconservative policies. And the social safety nets that you and I both agree are needed have been being gutted for years. I think Trump came in and started saying the quiet part out loud and provided very simple solutions like building a wall to complex problems. We'll ignore the fact that a 10-foot wall can be beaten by an 11-foot ladder, but it's a very concrete solution that somebody who doesn't want to think about the problem very much can understand and get behind. And I think he was very contentious and combative and got a lot of free TV time and press time as a result. And that was huge. Tubo D PVC. I must have missed your comment, but Ricky's replying to you. Smite Knight, the general right welcomed that kind of rhetoric. They did all but say what Trump did, except without the vulgar descriptives. Trump doesn't represent something new within the Republican Party, but rather a cruder representation of the same arguments they've been making since about the early 2000s. I think Trump started saying the quiet part out loud, and the Republican base, the people that vote in the primaries, jumped all over it. If you remember, after he won the primary, there was a lot of hesitation in the Republican establishment and Republican Party overall, the leadership, about endorsing him. There was even talk about the Republican Party not endorsing him and running somebody else. But ultimately, they decided to fall in line instead of stand against it. Hardwood and Sock, I find it hard to believe I'd ever join the Dems, maybe Libertarian Party. Brother, I am willing to bet at this point, honestly, with the conversations you and I have had, that you have more resistance to labeling yourself as a Democrat than you do with the individual policies. And you notice I don't label myself as a Democrat, right? I'm a progressive and I follow individual policies, and the Democrats right now happen to line up more with my policies than I get it. I wore that Republican jersey for a long time, and it's hard to take it off and put on another one. My suggestion to you would be to do the same thing I did. Take off the jersey. You don't have to put on another one. As Argos has been pointing out, you can identify as independent. It's going to take some more work from you. I'm not going to lie, because you're going to have to figure out the individual candidates who agree more with your policies and beliefs instead of just voting a straight party ticket or using that party ticket as a guideline, right? But you don't have to put on a jersey. There's no requirement. You've heard me say before, if the Republicans run a Teddy Roosevelt tomorrow and the Democrats don't run somebody who's stronger than that on balancing corporate versus worker rights, right? And somebody who's strong on defense, then I'll go back to voting Republican. The problem right now is the Republican Party has a problem with people within their own party who talk about reality if it might hurt Republican interest. And I can't back that. Curtis Bergeron, hey guys, sorry I missed you today. Hey, welcome in. I know it's Mother's Day. If you haven't already, text your mom and tell her Happy Mother's Day. And that goes to anybody else who wasn't here when I said that before the break. But I appreciate you tuning in. You missed the first part of the show, but if you got any questions, feel free to fire away, my man. Ricky the Great One, both the CDC at the federal and state levels recommends it if you've been in contact with somebody who's been sick or you suspect being sick. Curtis Bergeron, removing reality. Yes, I'm specifically referring to the Liz Cheney situation. She is the third ranking member of the House from the Republican point of view. Every time Donald Trump writes on his little blog, since he can't tweet anymore, that the election was a massive fraud and basically he should still be president, Liz Cheney will write an op-ed in the Washington Post like she did this week, or send out a tweet like she also did this week. That might have been last week, basically saying that the election was fine, it was not fraudulent, and that you need to actually have evidence to make claims like this, that you shouldn't be doing this. It's detrimental to our democracy, right? And the Republicans, the Republican leadership, I'm not talking about you, the average guy that's out voting, right? I'm talking about Senator McConnell. I'm talking about House Republican Minority Leader McCarthy, second in ranking House members, Steve Scalise, right? They're not correcting Donald Trump or correcting the record about his lies about the election. They're wanting to remove Liz Cheney from her leadership position. Now, I disagree with Liz Cheney on a lot of stuff. But in this area, she's pointing to reality. The rest of the Republican Party is either living in fantasy land, or they're not willing to tell the other people that are living in fantasy land that they need to come back to reality. That's what I'm referring to. Become an independent, rethink your assumptions. Yes, Argos, I agree. Six Semper Tyrannis, I feel you, hard wooden sock. I didn't see what you're referring to. Chat's moving a little fast. I identify as trans-political. Curtis Bergeron. I've seen that, man. That thing's too ridiculous for me. So much of it is misunderstanding. I forget what his name is that does that. Sock, I see you on the line. I'll get to you in just a second. Ricky the Great One. Six Semper Tyrannis. I am libertarian, right? I don't see a libertarian ideology that if you bring it to its full conclusion doesn't lead to like feudalism. That's the problem I have with it. A lot of libertarians at this point are just conservatives who are uncomfortable labeling as conservative. As long as you vote against the policies that aren't based in reality, you and I aren't going to have any major disagreements until we get down to individual policies. Curtis Bergeron, I can tell you from experience, she doesn't represent her people accurately. Evidence is there. Her and Romney can head on it. Okay, so two things. Heritage Foundation and American Conservative Union, both conservative political think tanks, which you can jump back to the beginning of the episode and look at the evidence yourself, both rate Cheney as more conservative and more conservative on the issues than the people, or than Representative Stefanik from New York, who is the person that is going to replace her in the Republican leadership position. So you're replacing her with a less conservative option. You're also replacing her with somebody who voted in favor of President Donald Trump's policies or positions or whatever the case is less often than Representative Cheney did. The only place where Stefanik sided with Trump and Cheney did not is on the election fraud bullshit. So unless you can prove the election fraud stuff, yeah, we're dealing in fantasy here. And that's why Representative Stefanik has endorsements from President Trump pushing her into the leadership position. We got to get back to evidence, brother. As for Romney can head on out, man, he was y'all's presidential nominee, not 8 years ago? It needs to be about the country, not about loyalty to Donald Trump. Hey, Sock, you're on the air. Welcome back in, brother.
What's up, brother? How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How's your Mother's Day been?
Oh, it was good. Got to see my mom for a little bit and have some dinner and took an hour drive home.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. I hope she's doing well. So what you got for me?
Alrighty. So Liz Cheney, I mean, I don't know much about her, other than that she really voted to impeach Trump the second time, which I don't fully agree with. I think that it was right to have a hearing, I guess, but, when you look at what he actually said, especially the part where he said we're going to peacefully cheer on politicians while they do their job.
And maybe not so peacefully, as he said right after that?
I don't remember the not so peacefully part. Maybe I just heard the peacefully part, but I'll have to rewatch it.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, he also said we're going to fight like 6-7 times.
Well, how many politicians have said we're going to fight?
Oh, I don't disagree with that. But if I bring everybody together, if I set the date, right, and then tell everybody we're going to go down there and I'm going to march with you, right, and that we're going to have to fight or we're going to lose our freedoms, we're going to lose our democracy. You can't see how this is set in a very dangerous stage?
Yeah, but you're... I hate trying to defend the January 6th because, I don't support what they did at all.
Okay.
But I just don't believe the narrative that Trump incited that. Trump held a rally, correct, and he told them to go to the Capitol, but he didn't tell them to go in the Capitol. He told them to peacefully cheer on politicians. He said, we got to fight. Sure. Every politician has said that. So I don't put too much weight in the word fight, because if we're going to do that, then we can pretty much say goodbye to everybody in Congress.
Do you think the insurrection would have happened had President Donald Trump not spread the lie about the election fraud and about the whole election being fraudulent?
No.
Okay, so that's my first question. My second question is, do you think that had he not set the date for the rally on January the 6th, the day Congress was constitutionally mandated to verify the results of the election, that this would have happened?
No.
Okay, so we've established that he started the lie, right? And that he set the date. Right? Okay. So then he follows Rudy Giuliani on stage after Rudy Giuliani had basically just said, we're going to have trial by combat to win this election. Then goes up on stage and starts talking about how you have to fight and we have to march down to the Capitol and you have to make your voices heard peacefully and maybe not so peacefully in some cases. And we're going to cheer on our senators and representatives while they do their job. And you're going to, if we don't fight, we're going to lose our freedoms and we're going to lose our democracy. So for you, even starting the lie, setting the date, advocating for fighting several times, but he would have had to have specifically said, you need to go down to the Capitol and commit a coup for you to want to impeach him. That's what you're telling me.
Pretty much, because based on when I heard his speech originally, I did not infer that as go in and disrupt Congress. That's not how I perceived what he was saying.
So if I'm in a theater, right, and I stand up and yell fire without any evidence, right, and that causes people to run out of the theater and trample each other, and somebody dies, I can be held liable for that, even though I didn't specifically tell them to run out of the theater and to trample somebody to death. How is this any different?
I just don't think that what his statements said implied, let's run into the Capitol.
Even though he told him to march down to the Capitol.
For example, okay, march down to the Capitol.
Yeah.
Okay, how many protests have happened at the Capitol?
How many protests were thinking that the election was fraudulent and were told to march down to the Capitol and that they had to fight to preserve their freedom and their democracy? Because you have to remember, this lie here, right, about the election fraud is specifically telling the people that are there, and you're going to have the most devout supporters and believers show up for this kind of event. I think you and I can agree on that, right? Because I'm not flying to Washington, D.C. to support Trump's, the election was fake bit, and I doubt you did either.
Oh, hell no.
Exactly.
I saw the writing on the wall, like, that just wasn't going to be, it was pointless.
Yeah. So telling people to march down to the Capitol in support of this lie, you're already playing with fire at a minimum. And again, I don't see in the theater example how it's substantially different. I'm yelling a lie in public that I have no proof of, right? I'm not telling people to trample each other on the way out of the door, but the consequences are imminently foreseeable.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing at Ricky.
Oh, no, that was a good one. For anybody who can't read the chat because they're on mobile, Ricky the Great One says, okay, I'll let my CIA contacts know you're clear at Hardwood and Sock.
No, we both know that I don't subscribe to the election was stolen bullshit. You know?
I know.
But
I have to establish that for the people in the chat.
Yeah. I guess my whole thing was he lost the election. It was already, in the matter of 2 weeks, he was going to be out of the presidency. And after the events of January 6th, he was done anyway. He basically went real quiet, after that. And then, I don't know. I just don't see it. Sure, would I like to have him censured so he could never run again? Sure. I would agree with that.
Okay. So that's one thing impeachment would have accomplished.
Yeah, I know that's one thing impeachment would have accomplished. But, do I think that, he needed to be fully impeached? No. But even without impeaching him, they could still censure him from running again, correct?
I don't think so. I think censure is just basically a record that what you did is bad. And as we've seen several Republicans get censured for voting in favor of impeachment, they can still run. It's just it's just essentially Congress or the Republican Party saying, you did a no, don't do that. And my question at this point is, okay, we know he set the stage. We know he caused, he started the lie and he propagated the lie about the election fraud and all that kind of stuff, right? You and I agree there. Okay. And we know he told them to march down to the Capitol. And even if you and I disagree that he needed to say the words specifically, go down there and commit a coup, right? Once it started happening and he sat on his hands for hours, no calling the National Guard, no sending in anybody to help solve this problem, just sitting on his hands for hours, even when other Republicans were calling.
The time for silence
for help
is over.
That alone is enough for me.
Okay. I mean, I think we just have different levels of what we're looking for. You know what I mean?
So what would it have taken for you?
If he would have said, let's go and force Congress to give us the result we want, instead of, which he did not say, let's go to the Capitol, let's force Congress to give us what we want. And he didn't say that,
So unless he would have specifically said the words, basically, that I want a coup and I'm not going to leave office, right? You're telling me it's not enough for you.
Correct.
So in the theater example, I wouldn't be guilty. You would vote not guilty in my case.
Correct.
What about... So anybody who talks like a mob boss, hey, this guy, it's a problem. We need to take care of it. Since I'm not specifically telling somebody to go murder that guy, it's okay. I get away with it.
Well, if the guy ends up murdering somebody, that's, that's different.
Okay. So if the Capitol ends up being stormed, is that different?
I mean, I think we have different, standards of what we see as, impeachable or guilt,
I know, and I'm trying to figure out what yours is that would be a low enough bar that it would still matter. Because if the insurrection had been successful, right, we might be having a whole different conversation at this point, right? I might not be allowed to be on the air. Who knows where the hell we would be, right? But it wouldn't be an outcome you or I would want to be living in or through. I think you and I can agree there, right?
Well, I think anyone who actually thought it would be successful when they were pretty much all unarmed anyway, it was never going to happen, you know. Like anyone who actually thought they could overthrow the United States government unarmed with zip ties, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, if you would have told me beforehand that they would have been able to storm the Capitol and get inside the building and, like, you know, get within, I won't say arm's reach, but, you know, within what, they're 15 feet behind that door of, you know, of sitting U.S. senators and congressmen during a riot, I wouldn't have believed that either. But if I get to set the defenses and dictate when the National Guard comes out and all that kind of stuff, it kind of makes things easier.
Well, I believe that there was a whole bunch of security issues that should have been, you know, like that will never happen again. There's been reports of the D.C. mayor saying that she didn't want a strong police presence on January 6th because of the optics. So it's like there was a multitude of issues with the security of the Capitol on January 6th, which caused a bunch of people to resign, you know, and that you can't solely place that on Trump.
I'm not solely placing it on Trump, but you and I agree that he started the lie and spread the lie, that he's the one that set the date for it, that he told them to march down to the Capitol. I mean, and somebody else pointed it in chat. I think it was Smite Night. But, you know, if I start the lie that this guy owes me money, right, and then I send you over to this guy's house saying, you know, it'd be a shame if something happened to him, you know, and his legs end up broken, I would be responsible for that. And this is where you and I seem to disagree, right? He set the stage. He told him to march down there. He spread the lie. He set the date, right? But for you, he had to explicitly say, go commit a coup. And we're talking about impeachment here. I'm not even talking about like locking him up for a lifetime, right? We're saying we're going to boot him out of office, you know, what, a week early, 2 weeks early, right? The minute it happens, and you're not going to get to run again. I mean, call me crazy. If your actions lead to a, you know, storming of the United States Capitol building based on a lie, I don't think you should be able to run for office again.
No, and I mean, I do agree with you on that. Like, I don't really want him to run again, you know.
So why should I not impeach him?
Because at that point where, like, obviously, like the air, like, I'm trying to figure out my words.
No, you're fine. Take your time.
The tension was so great, you know, and the insurrection attempt on January 6th might not have been releasing the tension. It might have just been saying, hey, this is where our tension's at, so that if you impeach him, then you have a lot more pissed off people. You know what I mean? Like, it could have been adding fuel to the fire, is kind of what I'm saying.
So from my point of view, the United States does not compromise or negotiate with terrorists, right? I'm not keeping somebody up there that's inciting insurrections because it might make other people mad. That's like saying I shouldn't lock up the mob boss because it might make the mob mad. At least that's how it's coming across to me, brother.
No, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I hope you see my point. Like, in this instance, though, right? You saw a violent insurrection, right?
Yeah.
That happened at the Capitol.
That
right?
the president set the date for.
Like, and in the matter of 2 weeks that he's out of office anyway.
Yeah,
right?
but I'm removing him well before that. I'm not giving him 2 weeks with access to nuclear codes, with access to command authority for the United States military. To me, that's even more reason to remove him immediately. I have somebody that is spreading a lie that led to the direct assault on a constitutionally mandated process by the second branch of the United States government, the legislative branch, right? That stood by and did nothing to stop that attack. Like even if I could like accept your he had to say it explicitly bit, right? The fact that he sat by and did nothing, no calling off his supporters for hours, no deploying the National Guard. I think it was Mike Pence that had to do that, right? Just sat on his hands to see how this would all play off. And Ricky the Great One pointed out, did a little dance, and I can't verify that, but I think that I remember hearing that. It's been a few months, right? This is not somebody I want having access to nuclear codes. This is not somebody I want having access and command authority over the United States military. I don't want to put the United States military officers in a decision where they have to decide whether to follow their oath to the Constitution or their, orders from the President of the United States. I want him out of there yesterday, not 2 weeks from now.
No, I mean, I understand your side of it. Don't get me wrong. But, like, I personally didn't think that there was a chance of him even using the nuclear codes or anything like that. So, like, that wasn't a big worry for me. But, I mean, I think we're just going to agree to disagree on this one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the problem
we
with
agree on certain aspects of it, but
the problem where we're agreeing to disagree though is your standard for impeachment, not even like conviction and locking in jail, right, would never allow me to lock up a mob boss, for example. And I'm sure I can find other revolutionaries and other people who have led coups that did it without saying, go down to the Capitol and start a coup.
I mean, usually coups happen in the form of like a military coup.
Not always.
Which didn't happen.
Yeah.
But usually, I'm just talking like in general, that's usually what ends up happening. I mean, you can look at the revolution for like an actual coup, in a way. I guess that's more just breaking free. No, it's not really a coup.
Like I said, I don't see the rationale for keeping him in office because, again, from my point of view and what you've agreed with, he started the lie, he spread the lie, he set the date, he told him to march down to the Capitol. Then we'll skip the part where you and I disagree, right, about whether it was enough telling him to march down to the Capitol instead of committing a coup, right? Then he sat on his hands for hours to deploy relief. Smite Knight just pointed out he was tweeting about election fraud and against Mike Pence as rioters were in the Capitol, right? And, ultimately Mike Pence had to call out the National Guard, right? And then he still had 2 weeks left on his term. To me, that whole chain of events, even if I leave out the part where you and I disagree, is impeachable. I don't want that person in the office of the President of the United States. I think it violated and threatened the constitutionally mandated process to validate the election.
Okay. I mean,
I appreciate it, brother.
I see your side of it.
Yeah. And it's hard for me to see yours on this one. I've been more than charitable in our previous conversations. This is one I don't think you're going to get me around on or even able to see from your point of view. I'm just going to be honest about that.
I know that. And that's fine. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not expecting you to always see my side of it.
Fair enough. Yeah, this one's a hard stop for me. And if you go back to the episode right before the insurrection attempt, I had a former friend of mine that I used to work with that was former military, same as myself. He was huge into the QAnon stuff, and I was trying to warn him because he was going to the January 6th rally not to go down to the Capitol, not to get involved in this stuff. Anybody who was looking at it to me could see this coming from a mile away, and the fact that the president couldn't is just beyond the pale. I can't buy that. And then, like I said, even if you could get me that far, the fact that he sat on his hands for hours is that removes all doubt to me, right, about what he was comfortable with going on. Those two things, I want that person out of office immediately. The same as I would want a mob boss locked up, even if I knew he was going to die in 2 weeks, because I don't want other people getting injured, and I don't want, the country being threatened and citizens being threatened. But anyway, I'll give you the final word, and then I'll let you go, brother. Happy Mother's Day.
Yeah, happy Mother's Day, man. So anyway, I don't like Liz Cheney. I don't like Mitt Romney. I know he was the presidential nominee back before I could vote.
Yep.
But since then, I don't really like him. I don't think he does much. I don't think Liz Cheney does much. So, all right, cool. You want to remove her from her leadership role? Whatever. And
but should you be removing her from her?
Worse than her?
Yeah, that would be my question.
Well, no, I know they replaced her with someone worse than her, which I don't think a bunch of these Republicans understand. I think they just don't like Liz Cheney, so they're just willing to look past what the next person is. So it's all right, whatever. I would rather see someone else in her leadership role. I don't know who exactly, because I don't know exactly what leadership role she had in the Senate. But
third ranking member of the House from the Republican point of view. I think they call it like a committee chair, essentially.
Oh,
but,
she's in the House? Oh,
yeah.
Fuck me.
Yeah.
God, I'm terrible.
No, you're okay. You're okay. With with the smaller states that have 2 senators and 1 representative, it's easy to confuse the two.
Well, all right, cool. Well, all right. So you want to remove her, replace her, whatever. You know what I mean? I don't think it's really going to make a huge difference one way or another, because they replace it with someone who's worse. But whatever. That's neither here nor there. She's still going to be there, so it doesn't really matter. But if you don't mind, I'm going to plug my, I'm actually going to start streaming here this weekend.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
On Twitch.
Well, cool. I can call in and harass you.
Yeah, except, once I figure out how everything works, I'm actually going to be on the Hippy Dippy recruitment panel on Sunday.
Awesome.
So look out for my channel. It's going to be under Hard Wooden Sock. It's going to be on Twitch, and I don't know exactly what content we're going to have all the time, but that's kind of what we're going to do.
No, absolutely. And for anybody who's unaware, Hard Wooden Sock is a conservative who calls in on a regular basis. I've always found him to engage in good faith. And yeah, by all means, go check him out. So let me know when you actually decide to go live. But I'm going to let you go. I appreciate you calling in as always, and hopefully I'll catch your stream when you go live.
All right, appreciate it, brother. I'll see you.
Always, man. Have a good one. All right, everybody, welcome back. Thanks for sticking with us through the call. Excellent call from Hardwood and Sock as always. Let me see if I can catch up on chat. I'm not going to scroll all the way back up because I saw y'all were jumping back and forth. Six Semper Tyrannis, the fair process was already in question, though, because of all the voting anomalies, the evidence of which wasn't taken seriously due to the possible threat of massive far-left riots and protest. And then Likely Diamond, I got to head out too. Hey, thank you for dropping by. I greatly appreciate it. On that, Six Semper Tyrannis, so you failed, not you personally, right? Trump's claims failed in court 60 plus times. And we're not talking about one individual court here, right? We're talking about courts in multiple states, courts with judges. The time for silence is over. Lynn, thank you for the follow. Courts with judges that were appointed by Democrats, courts with judges that were appointed by Republicans, and courts that were appointed by President Trump himself. And they all shot this thing down because of lack of evidence. Sidney Powell, one of the attorneys, okay, who pushed this nonsense, specifically about the Dominion voting systems being influenced by Venezuela and Hugo Chavez and all these other scary names she could turn out. Now that she's being sued, is using the defense that no reasonable person would have thought that this really happened. Let that sink in. She's not even backing this anymore. She was one of the members of Trump's legal team until she wasn't, because her press conference didn't go too well. Then she was just an affiliated member. Historically, the rate of voter fraud is 0.00009%. I might have one extra zero in there. Regardless, if you and I are voting, there is a greater chance of you getting struck by lightning than there is of you mailing in a fake ballot or voting fraudulently. I don't see a massive push to install lightning rods around the country to protect our electoral integrity. There's a reason all of this has failed in every court it's gone to. The one case, the one that I'm aware of that President Trump's legal team actually won, was before all the votes were counted, and it was in Pennsylvania, and it was a Pennsylvania State Supreme Court, if I remember correctly. And as the votes were being cast, a Republican said, "We're standing 12 feet away as election observers, and we would like to stand closer to monitor," while the election was going on. And the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court said, okay, both you and the Democratic observers can move to 6 feet. That one victory doesn't show that one vote was fraudulent, that one vote was changed, that one vote was thrown out. Doesn't show any of that. Now, I've done a couple of episodes, if you want to go back and look them up, into the specifics of a lot of Trump's claims in court. I've done an entire deconstruction of Sidney Powell's interview that she gave, and the vast majority of it boils down to misplacing the burden of proof. If somebody comes out and says that this thing happened or this thing is real, it's on them to prove that it's real. It's not on me to prove that it's fake. And if I went to your wife and said you were cheating on her, you would understand that real quick why it's important. Because it wouldn't be up to you to prove to your wife that you weren't cheating. Or at least you would hope it wouldn't be up to you. It would be up to me to prove that you were running around on your wife. And you would hope that she wouldn't believe me until I provided some evidence. It's not my fault that Trump isn't providing evidence of a massive multi-state-wide election conspiracy effective enough to overturn the presidential election in multiple states, in multiple counties, at multiple polling locations. My standard of evidence is the same. It's not my fault he's not providing any. And it's going to take a hell of a lot more than 2 ballots here and 5 ballots there to provide evidence of a massive multi-state-wide, dozens of counties, hundreds of people, thousands potentially of people involved conspiracy theory. That's where we're at on this. Argo, social manipulation being used by the Republican Party. If you're referring to the topic I'm on, I tend to agree with you. I think it's a useful lie, and I think that's why they're running with it. Daniel Rupert, I think I missed you dropping in. Welcome to the stream. The evidence of which wasn't taken seriously. Ha 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 ha. Yeah, it was investigated to death. It's nobody's fault except Trump and his legal teams that they couldn't find any proof of this. And the fact that he was screaming it was going to happen before the election ever took place is pretty obvious what he was trying to do. Anybody else, or we're going to wrap up here very shortly. I'm already running over. Fisty Talks. Hey, welcome in, brother. Don't be a fool. Wrap your tool. Hey, man, we're wrapping up the stream, but I appreciate you dropping by. I think you would have had an interesting take on this one. So if you can, or if you have the time, feel free to rewatch it. Michael, great show, man. I'm glad I actually got to watch today. Oh, I didn't know how much of it you got to watch. It's awesome to see you. Thank you for dropping by, man. I appreciate the support. Fisty, you'll check the VOD for sure? Yeah, man, I greatly appreciate it. For anybody who doesn't know, Fisty Talks is also a streamer. He's called in before. Excellent call. Very civil. He doesn't do politics anymore, from what he told me, but just to chill, relax, hang out, play some games on occasion streamer. Everybody should go check him out. Great guy. New Socialist Era, guess that's it. Hey, sorry, brother. Every Sunday, 2 to 4. And for anybody who hasn't, oh, it's up here now, right? Like, follow, subscribe, and you probably with this channel want to hit the little bell because like I said, I run more of a show than I run a stream, right? So you're only going to catch me for 2 to 3 hours every Sunday. Okay. New Socialist Era. Are you left as in socialist or left-wing liberal? Just wondering. I identify as a progressive. And you followed, by the way. Thank you for the follow. I think I caught you earlier. I identify as progressive. The short version is I can see useful policies and procedures from most ideologies. I won't say all because there's some are just bankrupt. I'm always going to follow evidence, reality, data, logical argumentation. If I'm wrong, I would rather know I'm wrong than continue to be wrong. I think there are some socialist reforms that need to be done. I'm in favor of strong social safety nets, for example. I think we've gutted a lot of ours. I think we need to desperately rebalance between the monopolistic or almost monopolistic corporations and workers. For instance, I have advocated for raising the minimum wage and tying it to inflation since we're one of the few countries that doesn't tie it to inflation. I do still advocate for markets. I think there are instances where we have applied capitalism that make absolutely no sense whatsoever because we don't want a profit motive in those particular fields. I see reasonable reasons for a market when it comes to like shopping for a new phone, right? You have time to go make an informed decision. When it comes to going to an emergency room or shopping health insurance when it's provided by your employer, right? I don't see a lot of people making informed decisions on what ambulance company they want to use. They're not taking the time to research it because when you're shot in the leg or you chopped your arm almost off or you're having a heart attack, time's pretty sensitive. So I don't know what you want to label me, but when it comes down to specific policies, you can ask me and I'll tell you where I sit. If you ever disagree with me on anything, or if you agree, the number's always toll free down there, right? Because like I said, I would rather find the correct answer, find the truth, than I would just win an argument. Proletariat Parrot. Hey, man, I haven't seen you in a while. Welcome back. You caught us right as we are wrapping up. I'm sorry to say. Smite Knight, don't worry, we'll get you off capitalism. I don't know that I'm hardcore on capitalism, but like I said, I see uses for both. That's where I'm at right now. New Socialist Era. I'll have to come on sometime and raise some awareness of at least some semi-socialist ideas that do work even today. Yeah, you're more than welcome. Like I said, I always run last week's episode and this week's episode as topics for discussion. So anybody that wants to call in on those two things, you're more than welcome. If there's a specific thing you want to address, feel free to shoot me a link in DM on Twitter, right? And I forget which one it is, and I get it backwards. Yeah, right there. You can DM me, right? And I'll look it over. I don't do just open up stuff on stream because I've had some weird, like, neo-Nazi stuff sent to me. So now I have to screen it all. Proletariat Parrot. Geez, all of my favorite leftist streamers are here tonight. I'll take that as a compliment because that means I'm keeping good company. Ricky the Great One, have a good night. Fisty Talks, have a good night. And Ricky the Great One and Smite Knight are attempting to set up a detox center for capitalism. And on that note, I think we're going to wrap it up. We're going to run an exit video as always. It'll be a new one, or rather an old one. I think we're going to run the one that I did for voter fraud outcomes. So bear with me and see if you enjoy it. And everybody, again, as always, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And I will see you next Sunday. If you haven't yet, call your mom. Say Happy Mother's Day. It's the least you can do. The time for silence is over.
Have we seen proof of voter fraud at this point?
Some of those lawsuits, though, have already been dismissed.
You just can't go into court because you're mad or upset
without any evidence to support it.
The Trump campaign filed lawsuits in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Georgia. But by this afternoon, judges in Michigan and Georgia dismissed the cases.
You just can't go into court because you're mad or upset.
The ballots are out of control.
I have not seen the proof.
District Judge Matthew Brand dismissed the suit brought by the Trump campaign. Tonight, a federal judge says he won't stop Pennsylvania from certifying its election results.
You just can't go into court because you're mad or upset.
I have not seen the proof. I have not seen the proof.
There won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation.
Remember that.
There won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation.
Remember that. Remember that.
Will you commit to making sure that there is a peaceful transferal of power after the election?
Well, we're going to have to see what happens. There won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation.
Remember that. Remember that.
The president is also still not conceding nearly 3 weeks after the election.
I won, by the way, but, we'll find that out.
We have not yet been made aware of any information that would change the outcome of the election in Michigan.
You'll never know who the winner is, but the winner's going to be me.
Right,
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by.
The president also got disappointing news Friday from Georgia.
I won, by the way, but, we'll find that out.
The numbers that we have presented today are correct.
Where a hand recount confirmed that President-elect Joe Biden won.
I won, by the way, but, we'll find that out. It'll be the greatest fraud ever perpetrated.
Right,
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. There won't be a transfer, frankly. There won't be a transfer. There won't be a continuation. There won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation. You'll never know who the winner is, but the winner's going to be me.
Join me every Sunday afternoon for a new show where common citizens, you and I together, discuss with each other issues of today, where we demand proof and evidence is required, where we seek the truth and will not be silent. Join me this coming Sunday afternoon and take part in America's oldest and most honorable tradition.